With the rising popularity of mobile payment and technological advancement in China, Alan Zhang and WeChat are looking ahead to the future to focus on new and innovative solutions to reach more people and consumers. Aloha and good evening. With Mr. Zhang and WeChat's goals in mind, our team aims to create both an inclusive and innovative WeChat through the implementation of various strategies to connect WeChat to SMEs. My name is Carrie, and today I will be joined by my teammates Sharon, Melanie, and Michelle. We are Malama Consulting from the University of Hawaii's Shidler College of Business, proudly representing the state of Hawaii.
WeChat's goals is to improve its services and product offerings towards SMEs to help develop their businesses, facilitate financial inclusion, and enable them to generate social impact, achieving its overall objective of value for users, tech for good. Taking this into consideration, our team has come to discover that in order to achieve Mr. Zhang's goal, there is an overarching misalignment issue between WeChat and the SMEs that they need to first recognize and address. On one hand, SMEs and WeChat are not on the same page in terms of what the small businesses' basic needs are and how to properly address them. WeChat is creating top-tier quality products for SMEs. However, some SMEs are just not familiar with how to use them. Additionally, WeChat's vision of SMEs' basic needs are skewed. To the SMEs, their number one priority is to keep their businesses from failing, so they rarely have the time to focus on other things. On the other hand, the SMEs and WeChat also do not share the same views when it comes to social impact, particularly its significance. First off, SMEs don't see the value that WeChat sees in pursuing ESG. Since SMEs are so focused on the bare minimum of surviving, the social impact that WeChat desires SMEs to achieve is nowhere on their mind. As we recognize and understand that the main task that Tencent has provided us is a way to seek product innovation for SMEs to provide social impact. However, after discussing it deeper as a team, we believe that the bigger issue that we should tackle first is the aforementioned misalignment issue. Both parts of this issue must be addressed in order for Mr. Zhang and WeChat to properly get businesses to generate social impact through the use of Tencent's IT tech solutions. In the remainder of the presentation, we come up with solutions to address these issues in order for the company to move forward with their mission. To give just a brief overview of the situation, we gathered that 90% of businesses in China consist of SMEs. Our team is particularly familiar with this makeup as Hawaii also has a high percentage of small and medium businesses that contribute to our overall economy. Even though SMEs make up approximately 60% of China's GDP, the saturation of SMEs has accounted for 20% of startup SMEs to fail within their first year, leaving only 1/3 of businesses to survive past 10 years. In addition to these statistics, SME's 18.5% failure rate in 2020, which tripled due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, shows SMEs are struggling and makes the industry quite risky for newer business owners to survive, especially those without the proper resources.
When recognizing the core issue of misalignment, we found that the issues at the basic level resonated with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In the contextual environment with the basic needs and barriers that SMEs possess when and if they choose to use WeChat, we learned that SMEs are focused on their safety and physiological needs. According to this hierarchy of needs, there are specifically defined as basic needs. The physiological needs would be things like food, water, warmth, and sleep, and safety needs would be things like health, employment, property, and family. The bottom line is that due to the COVID-19 pandemic and all their additional factors, basic business operations are increasingly more difficult. Therefore, SMEs are solely focused on keeping their businesses profitable. A major high-risk factor is also the equipment and high costs. Since the ROI is not guaranteed, many SMEs find it difficult to justify their purchases, and furthermore, many SME owners and employees are not tech savvy and do not possess the tech skills or ability to make the software work effectively. There's also a factor of distance, as many SMEs are located in rural areas and can find challenges in obtaining the necessary equipment and getting the information that they need to use the technology to best help them. All these factors mentioned, SMEs do not have the resources and the ability to focus on social impact efforts. Malama Consulting will be proposing that WeChat addresses the technology barriers and also the payment and financial barriers as well. Running a successful business all comes down to knowing your customers. The case mentions the challenges that occur when attempting to confirm payment, resulting in skip payments and ineffective mobile voice broadcasting. These ultimately can lead to both a short-term and long-term loss in profit. There are also logistical challenges that have to do with security concerns for business owners, difficulties printing due to costs and locations for printing, and the presence of silent merchants.
Now that Carrie has covered the contextual environment and problems that SMEs have been facing, here our team has provided a breakdown of both WeChat and the SME's perspective on social impact. WeChat believes that they are focused on its users' needs, helping them grow their business and make a meaningful impact on society. They believe that they are providing the necessary resources and products to get SMEs where they want to be. Moreover, WeChat desires to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion for its users through their product solution and pursuit of social value. However, SMEs, on the contrary, feel alone and without the proper resources to survive, let alone provide any impact for their community. They are too wrapped up in reaching the first level of their needs to look beyond. Moreover, most SMEs are silent merchants who are not familiar with how to use the technology that WeChat is providing, leading them to give up altogether. The advanced tech does not provide them any value if they do not know how to utilize it. Lastly, SMEs, unlike WeChat, are unaware of social impact initiatives or the benefits that they truly can gain from them. From the case, we've concluded that SMEs value things such as lowering costs and risks, especially during these uncertain times. Making them aware of what social impact is and what it can do for them and the community will increase the chances of them partaking in WeChat's tech initiatives. Moreover, here we have a breakdown of the number of cities in each city tier level in China. Even though there are traditionally many SMEs located in the bigger cities, there are still a large number of SMEs located in the rural cities. As you can see here, tier levels such as tier 4 and 5, which encompasses our target market, make up the majority of cities in China. Since people in these tiers live in rural areas and make less income compared to those in the higher tiers, puts them at a disadvantage as they don't have access to as many resources. WeChat's technology may be applicable to SMEs in tier 1 to tier 3, but those in tier 4 or tier 5 cities are both more likely to not be able to afford it nor know how to use it. This displays inequity, lack of social diversity, and inclusivity towards SMEs, particularly those in the lower tiers, which is opposite of what Tencent aims to achieve.
Just to summarize, the problem that we will be focusing on is dealing with misalignment in views between WeChat and SMEs categorized into two areas. Our team plans to address the first misalignment through creating new tech features and implementing a new payment model. To address the second half of the misalignment problem, we would propose developing community centers and an online community hub inspired by the actions taken here in Hawaii. Overall, we believe that this strategy will provide WeChat with a way to promote social value and its mission for all of its users. Our solutions will be discussed in further detail in the following slides by our team members, Michelle and Melanie.
So there is a misalignment between WeChat and SMEs in terms of how they understand social impact. From an SME's point of view, is it needed and necessary? Do they have the capacity to recognize the higher need, which is social impact? Our strategy consists of two phases, tackling the problem from the bottom up. First, addressing to fulfill the basic barriers, and second, to help SMEs in affording the social value. So taking a closer look, what do we mean by these? By fulfilling the basic barriers, we mean that, as our teammates have previously explained, before being able to focus on higher levels of need, first, we need to ensure that these SMEs are able to fulfill the basic level of need that comes with the safety of financial stability and basic operational capacity, as Carrie has mentioned before, using Maslow's hierarchy of need. We believe that to solve this problem, we need to introduce a step-by-step tutorial system that guides them through the process and introducing a new payment model. Next is helping SMEs to see the value and being able to afford social value, which will be realized through our proposed community centers, along with an online community hub, establishing a two-way conversation point, which my teammate Michelle will further explain. The SMEs are currently struggling because of the new and volatile environment. They're struggling to operate, struggling to exist. The way that we are addressing this is through building a new payment model. We wanted to start here because through our previous analysis, we have realized that they don't have the financial resources, and for SMEs, when they are trying a new technology, this incurs risks. This risk is the primary reason holding these small and medium enterprises back. So to mitigate this, our team has devised a risk reduction guarantee through this payment model, which is providing the equipment necessary to use WeChat payment system first and then pay later. Reducing the cost and risk for WeChat customers is our key to providing downstream value. Customers will be able to receive the necessary equipment to set up their businesses using WeChat payment, and as an additional feature on the application, we propose to provide a tutorial that takes this process step by step along the way due to this gap of technological knowledge that is apparent in these smaller enterprises. What some people may think of as intuitive can be challenging and a barrier for those that are not tech savvy. We also propose a slight alteration to the current payment system, as there were challenges in terms of payment confirmation. So the new process would ensure that the vendor will be able to set the price of the purchase, and the payee can simply confirm or decline the payment. This method is already used throughout other POS systems all around the world and eliminates the risk of skipped payments and the need to constantly monitor transactions. This initial equipment will come at almost no cost to the SMEs for the first 2 years, after which will be converted into a subscription-based model. Something we also noted was that we cannot let them take advantage of this free model and forget the value that we are providing. So they will be required to pay a small percentage of 1% of their yearly revenue. This percentage will be a fixed rate to counter the risks of inflation currently happening across the globe. This is mutually beneficial for both the SMEs and WeChat. For SMEs, we are reducing the risk of the big initial investment and efforts required to use WeChat Pay by providing the equipment both physically and intellectually to start them off the ground. As for WeChat, what this means is that they can increase their customer reach, providing their products to merchants who otherwise wouldn't have considered switching to this new payment method and actually use it. We also believe that WeChat will be able to practice DEI, promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to their consumers. Through this new payment model, we believe that we can level the playing field for SMEs who play against the bigger enterprises in this competitive market. Here, I wanted to take you through a simple financial breakdown from an SME's perspective. First, as we have mentioned before, the equipment that WeChat will provide will come in a deeply discounted initial deposit price that comes down to 35 RMB. As for the revenue, we have estimated it to be around 570 RMB, leaving the SME with 538 RMB in profit. Next, Michelle will walk you through the second phase of our strategy.
Thank you, Melanie. Now that we've gone over our strategy on how to first meet the basic needs to satisfy the SMEs, we are now able to afford creating social value. For strategy 2, we have 3 different recommendations. And as with everything WeChat develops, we also believe that these recommendations all serve a purpose of creating social impact. Before we dive into the value created, I want to explain how we got here. So as we stated before, the overarching problem is the misalignment between WeChat and the SMEs. This goes for the understanding of what social impact is too. For WeChat, you want to create value for users and use tech for good. But for SMEs, they don't share that same vision. In fact, just like Sharon said, they may not even have time to understand what social impact is and what they want for themselves. So when creating these recommendations, we really wanted to be able to have social impacts to cater to both parties. And you can see that as I've highlighted the social impacts for SMEs in orange and green for WeChat. So first, we want WeChat to create community centers. But what does this consist of and how will this work? Well, these centers will be placed in government buildings in each of the tier cities. That way we can work closely with the Chinese government and form that strategic partnership. And these centers will be available for the communities to get information through workshops and training sessions for WeChat. And overall, it'll just be basically a place of resource for them. This is a great opportunity for WeChat, and for the community because it creates value outside of the app. And with this recommendation, WeChat can also create more employment opportunities. With these community centers in place, the SMEs in tier 4 or 5 cities can have a voice for themselves, and they can have more representation, which WeChat can take advantage of to get more firsthand information so that they can cater the services to meet their specific needs. Along with the physical community center, we also believe it'd be beneficial to create an online version through the hub on the WeChat app. Similar to the benefits of community centers, this online version provides the SMEs that community where they can interact and ask each other questions. For WeChat, we believe that this fulfills your social impact goals on 2 levels. The first is having it be a sustainable development that positively influences corporate strategy, and the second being that it attracts more peers, business partners, and industry experts to engage. Both of these working together help promote interconnectivity. Now that SMEs have these resources to help them, the goal is for them to have more time focusing on their businesses and learning new skills, which leads us to our final recommendation. As we understand, you also want to offer new services to meet the diverse needs of your customers. Well, one new service you can offer is with customer relationship management. With how COVID has impacted SMEs, we believe this new service can help combat the issues of achieving offline and online integration. And the purpose of this recommendation is just to create a more efficient but easy to use service that helps SMEs in multiple areas. Next, let's take a look at the costs and benefits of our strategies. Starting with the cost on our right side, you see there's only a few costs to consider for WeChat. First, we have the implementation cost of the equipment in our first phase, which we've already gone over the financials for briefly, and the cost for WeChat is not significant. And then we have the cost of the building community centers, which we have also discussed, and since we're already using the government buildings in place, there's no additional cost on our side. And then we have to factor in the cost of developing the additional services of the CRM tool and the online hub. Together, these costs are relatively low, especially when you realize that implementing these strategies mean allowing WeChat to be accessible to many SMEs, which we know is a huge portion of the Chinese population. So now let's look at the benefits I've broken it down kind of to show you the domino effects our benefits have for you and SMEs. So the first thing would be to fix that misalignment problem so that everyone is on the same page. And with that, it gives SMEs the financial stability they need to run their operations with ease. And only after that are they able to recognize the social value they have. The introduction of our hub and community center with that, they are able to have more knowledge to run their businesses and use the WeChat platform effectively, which is power for them. After being able to use the services of WeChat on the long term, we believe that it is extremely valuable for WeChat, as with more customers means more data. And as we all know, data is extremely valuable. It gives you the information which you can use to build even more services to help the community, which again means your goal of using tech for good. So as you can see, the benefits outweigh the cost by a ton. And we hope that this helps you see the immense value these strategies could have once in effect. Now that we have finished looking at our strategies, I'm going to be going over our proposed timeline of events. With strategy 1 of addressing the basic barriers, we thought it'd be important to first change the payment process to be more similar to other POS systems, just like Melanie mentioned. And we want to do this before we integrate our other strategies of creating that step-by-step tutorial or starting our new payment model. But we can develop the new payment model at the same time. And as you can see, we have that timeline set for the full 4 years as we want it to be a lasting program offered. Then for the second strategy of affording social value, we have started these also a bit later, as we know we first must meet the basic needs of the SMEs. And just like the new payment model, these go on for the entire 4 years as they are meant to be lasting resources to be used. Lastly, I want to discuss the risk we pose on our mitigation strategies. In this chart, you can see that there are not many risks associated with each of our strategies, but let's look deeper into it. The first risk is that the new payment plan may be unprofitable. The likelihood of this happening is low since the cost on WeChat's end is low. But to mitigate this, we have put into place the solution of taking percentage of equity in the revenue so that there's guaranteed money back for you. The next risk is the low usage of online and physical community centers. This is the likelihood of this happening is medium, but we believe that the impact is low, again, because the costs are also low. Our mitigation strategy for this is to partner with and use government buildings already in place so that it's more familiar to the communities and they're more comfortable with going here already. We understand that the main problem is the misalignment between the SMEs and WeChat. We believe that we can bridge this gap through our 2 strategies where we help SMEs achieve their basic level of operational need and then help them to afford to provide social value, aligning with WeChat's emphasis and value for users, tech for good. Thank you, Alan Zhang and the rest of the WeChat team for being here and taking our recommendations into consideration. We hope that you see the value in our strategies and are able to implement these in your future plans. With that, this concludes our presentation from Team Hawaii, and we welcome any questions, comments, and feedback now. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. It's now time for Q&A. Please keep the questions concise and leave your thoughts and comments for the feedback session. The 15 minutes countdown starts now. Let's hear the first question.
Maybe I start first. So from a risk perspective, I think like you talked about it in the last slide or second to last slide. So you talk about low usage of online physical community center. And the mitigation is like using government building. Like maybe I would specifically pinpoint, I mean, I really want to know, I mean, if like you see a low usage of online community center, let's put aside the physical building. So what's the mitigation or actions that you would like to impose? Because if nobody is using it, then you are not kind of like bringing the creating social value, I mean, to the community, right?
Yes, thank you for the question. So the low usage of online and physical community centers, we did put it as a likelihood of 3, but we believe that a lot of the SMEs in tier 4 or tier 5 cities, they do want to use the WeChat application and be a part of that community. It's just that they don't have the resources to do so. So, which is why we're providing these community centers. And to go with why we're using the government buildings, like I said earlier in our presentation, I feel like in the tier 4 or 5 cities, since there's not much facilities offered, the government buildings that are already there, it can kind of seem like it's a familiar area for them, so that it's more inviting and more welcoming for them, since they know it's trusted and they know that they can go there for any information and help.
Thank you. If I may, and just another question. So you talk about subscription pricing when you talk about new payment method. So can you elaborate a bit, and what's the driver on that?
Yes. So first of all, thank you so much for the question. And then, so this subscription model, we wanted to put in place after 2 years because first we wanted to give some breathing time for these small businesses, as it is hard to get them off the ground initially with like a big financial burden. So after that 2 years, we wanted to introduce a low subscription fee model, which will keep like a recurring revenue model for WeChat. And with this process, it also helps the small businesses as they don't have to pay like big sums at like one point for like smaller amounts continuously.
Can I ask a question on this point? That if WeChat provide the facilities, the equipment first and get the payments a few years later, WeChat must have another risk like that. As you mentioned, that SME's survival ratio is quite low. That means that they close their business very easily. That means WeChat have another risk on the returning the equipment, also gets a revenue a few years later. So have you ever assessed this kind of risk from a WeChat point of view?
Thank you for the question. So our team did discuss this. And so, Carrie, if you go to the financial example slide. So in this 2 years, the other form of revenue that WeChat will be able to account on is the small percentage from the income of the merchants that use this. And then, as you said, there is the risk of them their business failing and then returning this the equipment to us. But in terms of that, the cost for WeChat is relatively low because in the end, we do receive the equipment back. And then also for that equipment, they did pay like an initial cost to cover that.
I would like to add to what Melanie has just said. Additionally, as a use case scenario, we've seen a model like this successfully work. For example, during the Great Recession in 2008, Hyundai took that risk and provided a payment installment model for all of the people trying to buy cars. and it actually worked in their favor as their overall GDP increased due to going on the limb and giving them that hand to provide resources to them, and it'll help them in the future. And yeah.
Another point you missed is there's a funding cost from a WeChat point of view. To provide the equipment and facility first, WeChat should get a funding first to bear the cost on behalf of the SMEs. But from your financial analysis, I think that the cost on funding from by WeChat is not considered, I think.
So to add on to that, we did consider that risk, but we thought of that risk as low because the equipment that is needed is actually, this itself does not cost much from WeChat's point of view, but it's definitely a bigger risk from smaller merchants in in city tiers 4 and 5, because even smaller costs can account for a lot. And as we've mentioned in our analysis, for some businesses, even costs such as printing the QR code means a lot to them because of their lack of resources. They have to go out of town to do that. But for WeChat to provide this printed code already, it really doesn't cost much. And so that's why we thought the risk is very low on WeChat's side.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question on the CRM. I think you did cover some of the detail. Could you please elaborate more to explain exactly what is the strategy and what is the proposal here and what's the benefit that you're talking about?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first part of the question?
I'm referring to CRM. I think you've mentioned in one of the slide about CRM opportunities, right? Can you please elaborate exactly how is this going to work? What's the benefit and what's the solution that you're providing here?
So I can definitely start us off. Thank you so much for the question. With that, some of the ideas that our teams discuss are features such as a COVID tracker that can help the communities measure the impact of COVID, and then also integration of other features such as deliveries. And we could partner with some other companies in China to help kind of turn WeChat into to have a logistics feature as well.
In addition to that, another service that we talked about while we were discussing this case was potentially creating ESG scorecards for the SMEs so that it'll allow them to quantify how much good they're actually contributing in terms of social impact and social value.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, to that, then why you call this a CRM? Maybe what's behind CRM? Is it a customer relationship or is it something else?
I could take that. So the idea of offering that CRM tool was, yes, for the customer relationship management. And I just got that idea from the case because when the pandemic hit, they were having a lot of issues kind of integrating that online and offline sales. So the CRM opportunities is just one of the ideas we were offering. But then I was talking about how the community centers and online hub, once that's in effect and once it's being used effectively, hopefully the SMEs can just have a little more time to grow their business and think of other stuff. So CRM opportunities is just one of them. But what Sharon mentioned before is just some of the other ideas that we had in mind, but we just want to focus and place one on paper.
So it's an overall support, to the SME from different dimensions.
Yes.
Okay. And I got another question related to your P&L. I think you did show earlier about the new payment method, the P&L for the new payment method, if I'm not wrong, the $30 or something, 30 RMB and $300 revenue or something like that. Yeah. So but like from an overall P&L perspective, because like other than just, the new payment method, right? So you also have the hub, you also have the communities and everything. So do you have an overall P&L per se? I mean, for this whole proposal?
Thank you so much for the question. So we do not have an exact number for overall, but then overall we just looked at like the cost and benefit, and then we just kind of inferred that overall these are small changes in terms to WeChat, and then so that's why the benefits will far outweigh the costs that will come to us.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
Any more questions? We still have 4.5 minutes left.
My apologies to interrupt. I would just like to add on to the last question that we were just given. We didn't exactly come up with a number for P&L, but as Melanie mentioned, we weren't making super drastic changes. So the funding that was mentioned previously would have came from, as most corporations tend to have an environmental social governance budget. So most of our funding would have come from that. So it wouldn't have directly impacted any of WeChat's actual expenses, or not as much, is what our thought process was.
Thank you. If I may, my last question is related to the, I think it's the implementation model. So you have some 4 years timeline. The new payment method is 4 years. What exactly is it mean?
Thank you for the question. So first of all, the new payment model itself consists of 2 years initially, but then in the timeline, we wanted to offer this program, this new payment model, for a duration of 4 years. And we can also extend this if we see that it does have a more positive impact in the long run.
So after 4 years, you plan to take it back? I mean, you're not going to support this payment method?
I think this will have to depend on the situation, and we will definitely evaluate the impact that this payment model had, and then evaluate if we should continue or if we should stop this new payment model.
Understood. Thanks.
Hi, you mentioned that from a cost side, not much costs are involved, right? How about on the risk side? What are the risks that you've considered? Do you see any financial, non-financial risks in this proposal?
Yes, so our risk and mitigation. So for one of the profit risks is that the new payment plan is going to be unprofitable, but we did have 2 different payment methods. So throughout the 2 years, we are going to be taking a percentage equity in the revenue. And then for a risk that's not financial related, we said that there may be a low usage of the community center that we're building or developing and the online hub. And because these costs are relatively low, we don't believe that the risk is high, but to mitigate that, we just hope that we are offering enough services and resources that they see value in and take advantage of.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Are there any other risks that you consider? Please go ahead.
Also, just to add on, another risk might be returns of equipment past or previous to the 2-year subscription mark. And while that may be an issue, we believe that once we establish the value and teach the SMEs the value of the equipment and the value of the services, that they'll be able to use them to their advantage and see the success in them.
Thank
So, thank you all. The judges now will stay in the room to deliberate, and team, you will be moved to the waiting room and be brought back to the room again for the feedback session in a few minutes' time.